Darkness kills, destroys the will. Find a spark, make hearts thrill. Hear the tales of time so grim. Shine a light, don't let it dim. Heather Brown downtown, bound. True crime story she's found. In the shadows, secret stay. Need a light that finds the way.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Defeating the Darkness. True crime stories with Downtown Heather Brown. That's me, your host. I'm a former homicide and sexual assault prosecutor here in Orange County, California. And tonight we have back with us one of my favorite guests and the listeners' favorite guests. He's back by popular demand. There were so many people that loved your last episode that
Thank you.
I had to bring you back. It's cold case homicide investigator, now retired, Bob Taft. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Yeah, no, I love having you here. I love to hear all your stories. And when you were here last time, you told a really interesting story about a cold case. I think we touched upon a couple of them.
Yes.
But I know that you have more stories in you, Bob.
I always have more stories.
Yes.
Not always good, but I always have more stories.
I know. And on that note, I wanted you to show our listeners your cool, badass tattoo. Okay. And can you see that? It says, sometimes darkness can show you the light. I think Bob was meant to come on the podcast, right?
Yes, actually. And I told you about the first time I heard the name of your podcast. I was like, oh my God. It was karma, destined to happen.
It was destined to happen. So we have a lot in common. We see the relationship between the dark and the light.
Yes.
And I know that you have been a huge bright light in the criminal justice system for so many years. And so for our listeners who haven't listened to your last episode, tell us a little bit about your career, because I know you worked for the sheriff's department, but tell our listeners your backstory a little bit.
I had previously been in the Marine Corps. When I got off active duty, I was hired by the Orange County Sheriff's Department. My initial assignment was, like all new deputies, assigned to the jail. At that time, it was an extended period of time in the jail. I did about 7 years total before I went to patrol. I worked patrol in the city of San Juan Capistrano. I did some time working in our terrorism early warning group, which was right after 9/11. I had some work dealing with both military entities and civilian law enforcement, so they thought I would be a good fit in that detail. From there, I got promoted to investigator. I worked detail called dignitary protection and intelligence, which had to deal primarily with when entities would come into Orange County, like political entities or high-profile individuals. We would work with their ensuing security detail to provide protection during their visit. After that, I did some time in North investigations, and from there, I was selected to work the Orange County DA's cold case task force. So I was the sheriff's representative on a cold case DA task force. I did that for several years. Collaterally, I worked with the Golden State Killer Task Force, also with the DA's office. Unfortunately, that unit disbanded in 2020, and when that happened, I rolled into full-time homicide, where I worked both active and cold cases. And then probably starting in 2021, 2022, they allowed me again to focus specifically on cold cases and genealogical investigations. And I retired this past March.
Congratulations. And can I ask what you're doing now besides traveling the world?
Yes. Actually, right before I left for my trip to Europe, I took a job with the Riverside County DA's office, working part-time for their cold case detail. Okay. So I'm still working cold cases for them. And I also came back as a reserve deputy with the Sheriff's Department, specifically assigned to the coroner's office to assist them in working their John and Jane Doe cases.
Okay, so tell our listeners, when you say cold case, I know, we hear that term tossed around a lot on television, but what is a cold case?
Everybody thinks that there's a period of time associated with cold cases. However, it's my experience that it goes cold whenever you run out of investigative leads. That could be the span of a couple of days, a couple hours, a couple of weeks, a couple of years. Doesn't matter the time frame. It's just that you have a certain number of leads to pursue, and when those leads are exhausted and you have nothing new to go on, then unfortunately the case goes cold. So Could be any amount of time when that happens.
So it's really a phrase that's used to describe like a homicide case where you don't know who did it, or maybe you know who did it, but you can't prove who did it.
Correct. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a homicide case. It can be any criminal investigation. Any criminal case can go cold without further investigative leads. So it's just not limited to homicides, but that is the common association with homicide cases when they go inactive.
Now, is it fair to say, would you agree with this, Bob, that homicide cases are the cases that the police agencies put the most resources into continually investigating them?
Yes. Yes, because that's the ultimate investigation. Like, there's nothing that essentially has a higher priority than the taking of someone else's life. So you're going to devote as many resources as you can, as soon as you can, to try and solve that case. And unfortunately, the longer time goes on, other cases come in, so you have to devote resources to those current cases. So the amount of, I wouldn't say diligence, but the amount of available resources to continue working that specific case on a continued basis diminish.
Yeah. And it seems as though you, in particular, have quite an interest in the cold cases.
I love it. I love working cold cases. They always say that you kind of find your niche, whatever that may be. In my particular case, I remember when I was newly promoted to investigator, my office was located on the second floor of headquarters, and right around the corner from my office, there was a small room. I wouldn't say closet. It was a little bit bigger than a closet, but it said press room on the front of it. And I always wondered what was in there. And eventually, over time, I heard that that's where they kept the cold case files. And I was like, wow, I'd really be interested in taking a look at some of those files that interest me. And unfortunately, because I wasn't assigned to homicide at the time, they're like, oh no, you can't do that. And then when I went on to that task force, that cold case task force, essentially I just would go into that office and I'd start reading files. And when I found one that piqued my interest, I decided to work that case. And it was kind of like a dream come true.
And so once you have that case and you're working that up, at some point, if you find some more investigative leads and you follow up on them, I'm assuming that there comes a point where you then think, hey, I think we got our guy or girl.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of it has to deal with two things. Obviously, one, new technology. Like, what evidence did they collect back then that can be subject to new evidentiary processing techniques that may lead additional clues or additional evidence, primarily DNA testing. Back in the 70s, 80s, and into the early 90s, DNA was not a thing. It wasn't on anybody's radar. Lo and behold, you come 2025, DNA is essentially the hallmark of most investigations now, especially when it comes to homicide investigations. And if we have any retained evidence from those old cases that can be subject to new DNA testing to possibly get some new information, then by all means, we're going to do our due diligence to try and revitalize those investigations.
Yeah, I love that. And there's other things too. Like I think on the last episode you talked about, I don't know if it's facial recognition or facial like the AI stuff that can show you what someone would have looked like.
Correct.
And
the other thing too
called?
is facial recognition or age enhancement technology. Or there was a thing that's not so prevalent now that was a couple of years ago with regards to DNA, is that they attempted to identify what a person looked like based off of that DNA. And I think it was a company called Parabon that would do, they call it a snapshot, I believe, that based on the DNA profile, they think this is what that individual looked like. They don't use that so much anymore.
So, and you mean the DNA of, like, let's say a perpetrator.
Correct.
Right. So if some DNA is left under the fingernails of a murder victim, strangulation victim, then they could potentially, using the DNA, isn't that the DNA they're not allowed to use though?
As far as,
like, it was my understanding from the limited, DNA knowledge that I have, although I did take quite a few classes in it, but that when we being law enforcement, of course I'm not in that anymore, but when I was, the DNA profiling that you're able to use is considered like junk DNA for identification of similar profiles, but there is DNA that people possess, different genetic markers that have indicators as to the color of their hair or the color of their eyes or how tall they might be.
Correct. Yes.
So are you talking about like the genetic genealogy?
Well, there's two forms of, I wouldn't say two forms of DNA, but there's two types of DNA processing when it comes to law enforcement use and law enforcement technologies. There's the traditional law enforcement, and they call it STR, short tandem repeat DNA, where law enforcement comes out, they do a swab, they send it to the lab, they identify a genetic profile based on a number of loci or identification markers in that DNA profile. And initially it was like 5, 7, 13. I think now they're up to 21 or 27 loci. So they are able to get a definitive identification of an individual based off that type of DNA. So if I leave saliva at a crime scene, they test that DNA, they come up with 21 markers. They take my DNA, I have the identical 21 markers. It's a chance of 1 in 3 trillion people that it's going to be somebody else. So essentially that's my DNA at the scene. When you're talking about genealogy type DNA, you're talking about SNP, SMP, I can't remember now, nucleotide polymorphisms, but it's a different processing of the DNA. So where an STR profiling, you're looking at up to 27 markers. With SNP DNA profiling, you're looking up to 1 million markers. And you're not going to be able to get a definitive identification. You're not going to be able to say, yep, that's your guy. You're going to say, based on the number of markers that match your DNA, it's likely that that individual or that DNA is associated with that individual. So in the case of like siblings, we each get 50% of our DNA from our parents, but my brother's DNA is slightly different than my DNA because of the way it recombines during
You might not
the
get
fertilization.
all the same
Correct.
alleles
It's
from
not
your
gonna
mom.
be an exact matching
dad.
pair. So
Except identical twins.
identical twins, but the technology has evolved far enough now that they're even able to identify the differences between identical twins.
Really?
Yes,
I
which-
didn't know that.
Just a few years ago, you couldn't even test for identical twins. And now they're able to say, yeah, I think it's this one over this one. Again, it's not 100% perfect science, but they're able to essentially say, we have preference for this one over this one. But to go back talking about SNP testing, the traditional unit of measurement when you're talking about that is called centimorgans. It's basically a name for a length of a DNA segment. So the more centimorgans of DNA that match between me and another individual, the more closely related you are. So the standard is between parent and child, you're going to share 3,500 centimorgans between you and your parent. Regardless if it's your mother or father, you're going to share 3,500 centimorgans. When you start going down to siblings, then that number drops to around 2,600, give or take, 2,600. Just because you have slight variances in your DNA. Then when you talk about parent or grandparent and grandchild, now you're dropping down to about 1,800. And then when you're talking first cousins, you're about 800, and second cousins about 200 to 400. So the further away you get genetically related, the less number of centimorgans you're going to have in common.
Same
And that's
half
the
brother
difference.
and half sisters, right?
Correct. That's the difference between the type of technology. It's able to say that's a 1,000,000% our guy, or they're related in this particular fashion.
With at least this amount of what do you call them?
Centimorgans.
Centimorgans?
Correct. And that's just the term that is like millimeters or inches or feet. It's just how they define a length of measurement when it comes to this type of DNA processing.
Interesting. Okay, so now we know that you have schooled up on this now that I gave you a pop quiz without telling you. I was going to question you about the intricacies of DNA, but you are fascinated with the use of new technology to try to solve old cases.
Correct. Yes.
And so I love that you're still doing that in retirement because you were really good at it, Bob. And
Well, thank you.
And I know that you still working on the murder of someone's loved one, on that case to try to prove it or solve it is, it's probably a thankless job. But when you do actually bring some closure for a family member or let them know, hey, we've identified where your loved one, when they went missing and they never knew what happened to them, you can
Correct.
give them a little bit of closure. So thank you for all that you're doing to shine a light in the dark places for people who don't know sometimes what happened to their
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
son or daughter just turns up missing, and you never know. Are they out there somewhere? They're alive somewhere, and at least, God forbid, they get murdered, but you locate them or are able to do some genetic genealogy to say, hey, we believe this is the person.
Correct.
Not only can you let the family member know, hey, your loved one was murdered back 20 years ago. That's what happened to them. But we think we might get the guy or the girl who did it.
Yes and no. And I guess it depends on the circumstances of the case. There's been a couple where, even though we were able to successfully identify the victim, we still have no idea who the suspect is. And even though you provide that sense of resolution to the family, knowing that, hey, unfortunately, my loved one was murdered and they didn't simply abandon the family, I don't know, what the benefits of that are. I haven't been in that situation, but, sometimes even though you're able to say, this is what happened to your loved one, then you turn around and start to work the criminal investigation, and unfortunately you still have no new leads. And so the case goes cold again, even though now we know who it is. And so there's been a few instances where, you hate to subject the family to that roller coaster yet again, where, oh, great, now we're finally going to get some justice for my loved one. And, unfortunately it still falls short.
Yeah. And that's got to be, I'm going to guess, disheartening and frustrating as well.
Yes. Yeah. And you kind of take a little bit, each one of these cases kind of takes a little bit with you. Like you become so vested in these investigations because they take a really long time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years you spend working these cases only to come up short. It is a little disheartening.
And when you left the sheriff's homicide unit, did you leave some of those?
Unfortunately, I left a lot.
You had to leave all the cases you were working, right?
I left a lot.
So today I was hoping that you could tell us a story or two about, I know there's 2 cases in particular you and I have talked about ahead of time that I want you to present to our listeners, because I think they'll be as fascinated as I was when you gave me the little Reader's Digest version. So, okay, so going back, so we were going to talk about a very interesting case that I think for our listeners, I want you to also let them know that sometimes when you think you have the person, the DA doesn't always agree with you.
Yes. That unfortunately, in my case, that's 100% true because I've worked dozens of these investigations over the course of 8+ years. I've yet to get a single cold case filed with our DA's office.
Wow, that's got to be disheartening.
Yes.
For the record, that was
frustrating.
never me.
It was never you. No.
Well, and I got to tell you, having been a prosecutor for, so many years, there are, the burden of proof, right, is the prosecutor has an ethical obligation to believe that they can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to 12 people.
Correct.
And inherent in that analysis is that prosecutor's confidence level in their own abilities. Inherent in that is that prosecutor's experience with certain types of cases and maybe something they previously believed they could prove. They've gotten it in front of jury and it's like, nope, sorry, not enough. So now they might be more gun shy to take a risk on a case that they, thought they could prove and then they can't. So that essentially undermines their confidence.
Correct.
And then, talent is certainly at issue.
Well, that brings an interesting sidebar. See,
Yeah.
legal term. I 100% agree. And it got to the point where I was bringing these cases to the DA and they're like, nope, 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 nope. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like, and the thing that I figured out, at least in my own humble opinion, is that law enforcement and attorneys think absolutely differently, because my whole job is identifying this is the guy that did it or girl that did it. The prosecutor's job is like, I don't care who did it. I just have to be able to prove it to 12 jurors. And my understanding is that really is a different mindset and a different set of parameters. So in my naive mind, I figured, well, okay, I just need to think more like an attorney so I can prepare my investigations better. That, you know, if I'm thinking like an attorney, maybe I will ask different questions that will convince the attorney to file these cases. So I actually took a year of law school to try and figure out how attorneys think, and it still didn't help.
And what was the last line you said?
It still didn't help.
Still didn't help.
I still
Maybe
never got a
you needed
case filed.
2 years of law school.
Maybe I did need 2 years of law school. So.
I love that you did that, though. It just shows what a fierce, advocate and fighter you are for the victims of these crimes, because if I'm murdered, right, I want somebody out there. I want a Bob Taft out there just leaving no stone unturned to find, some justice for my family.
Well, I have to say, I have to give the Orange County Sheriff's Department credit, because it used to be, and I'm sure you could relate, that when people got to homicide, they stayed for a long time. And a lot of people retired out of homicide as an investigator, and they spent, 6, 8, 10, 12 years working homicide. That does not occur at all anymore. I was kind of the last of an era, a dinosaur, but most of the individuals now stay 2, 3, 4 years, and
that's
then they move on to something else, or they promote, or they transfer, or do something. So I want to extend my thanks to the Sheriff's Department that they didn't mess with me. A lot of times, investigators in my position are asked to promote. I had no desire to promote. I loved doing what I did, and once they kind of got the picture, like, okay, yep, Bob's not going to promote, they allowed me to stay in my position and provided me the time and dedication to work these cases, especially cold cases that take so long, to allow me to do those. So I have to give them credit for that.
Okay, but maybe if anybody's listening, don't short circuit the people that are in there now, because as a DA, especially even I was in homicide for 5 years, but let me tell you, it takes experience and time and seeing things and learning things, right? You don't just know and understand the nuances of homicide law from the jump,
Correct.
Right? You have to experience it. You have to articulate it in a court of law to the jurors in a manner that they can understand over and over again, so it becomes second nature to you. And you also, have to basically perfect your craft at presenting things. Because listen, I did sexual assault cases for over 10 years and I was good. Okay. I knew what I was doing. I could try a sexual assault case in my sleep. I had done so many of them, and I'd seen so many things so many times over and over, and seen what works with the jury and what they, and so, and you develop kind of an instinctual understanding of what the jurors believe is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and what you believe you can prove, And so I don't think you get that with just 2-3 years in a very specialized unit, such as a homicide, even a gang unit case, or a sexual assault case. You have to develop your talent and your skill, and that takes time.
Correct.
For the investigations too. Like you were saying, sometimes well-meaning detectives or police officers just don't ask the right questions. And had they asked better questions, we would have had some better answers.
Correct. And like everything else, it comes with experience. And, the other thing that is a little bit difficult dealing with cold cases in a current technological world is a lot of these cases didn't have the technology that's available these days. Not only was DNA not available, but there was no video cameras, there was no cell phones, no cell phone towers, no text messages, none of that stuff existed. So essentially it was all based on either physical evidence collected at the scene with limited forensic testing at the time, or witness statements. I mean, that was kind of it. So,
And then by the time you actually get to the point where, hey, maybe you got some DNA, which gives you some context to a statement, the witnesses are dead, right?
absolutely,
Like,
yes, that is an
fast forward
problem.
Now we had a key witness, and maybe we could prove it that they're dead.
Correct.
So I got to tell you, that being said, with knowing that, cops think differently than DAs, for sure. And different DAs think differently than other DAs, right? Some are just cherry pickers. They want the easy case. They don't want to, Matt Murphy is, I love Matt and I like to rip on him too. But I got to tell you, that guy is like a junkie for the tough cases.
Yes.
For tough cases.
Yes.
He has established a reputation for taking really tough cases to trial that some other homicide prosecutors would shy away from.
Correct. Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. And those individuals are few and far between.
Yeah, and it's great when you're the detective and you find one of those DAs who's assigned to your particular agency.
Correct.
So, there is a pecking order and a chain of command, and you do have to bring it to certain DAs, and that's I'm not trying to, lay shade or whatever the word is on any of the prosecutors that you have worked with, but every prosecutor's experience is different, background, ability, confidence in their own self, talent, and just like perspective on evidence and what the meaning of it is and the weight that a jury might give to it.
Correct.
So you have to, as the investigator, navigate that. So let's just say I'm your homicide DA and you got this case. So bring us the case. I'm going to ask you the questions. If you came in my office, Bob Taft, and said, Heather Brown, I need a tough, aggressive homicide prosecutor with an open, reasonable mind to look at this evidence and tell me whether or not you think we got our person.
Yes.
Tell me the case.
Just to caveat this a little bit, this is actually still an open case. So can't give a ton of details because there is still the possibility that this case may be filed at some future point. So this particular case was one of those ones that I had walked into the cold case room. I started reading through the files, and this particular one stood out to me because it involved the death of a 10-month-old child. And anytime, at least for me personally, dealing with children, especially as young as that, they are truly, for the most part, innocent victims. So initially we had a child victim, and then looking through, I remember distinctly when I opened up the cover of that case book. As you well know, they all came in case books then. There was a sticky on there, and it was written by a former homicide investigator that had reviewed the case prior to me. And basically it said, no new leads at this time. And this had been several years prior. So not knowing what the case consisted of at the time, I'm like, well, I'm going to take a look and see what the details are of this case. So basically what had happened is that a young single mother had given birth to this girl, and she obviously had to go to work. So she didn't have a lot of financial means to afford childcare. So she had contracted with a young lady to do babysitting for her that was unlicensed.
Where'd you find the lady?
I don't know. I think it was kind of through a friend of a friend type arrangement. Maybe somebody in her complex recommended this individual. This particular babysitter had 2 one-year-old twins herself. So she was going to be actually watching 3 children. And
how old was the baby?
The victim in this case was 10 months old.
Okay.
And this happened in 1982.
Female.
Female.
Can we give her a fake name?
Sure. We will call her Nancy.
Okay. Baby Nancy.
So
10 months old, turns up dead.
Well, it doesn't turn up dead. Basically, the circumstances of the case is that mom drops Nancy off at the babysitter on her way to work. She arrives at the babysitter's house between 8 and 8:10, given the statements from the people involved.
AM?
AM. And this happened in an unincorporated area of Costa Mesa, so that's why it wound up falling to the sheriff's department. But initially, it was investigated by the Costa Mesa Police Department.
They were my agency when I was in homicide. I love that department.
So basically, mom drops baby off. The baby's in a car seat and walks into the house, puts the car seat on the couch. Baby's in the car seat. Mom and the babysitter chit chat a little bit, like, "Hey, I got to get to work." Baby fusses a little bit. Babysitter picks up the baby. Mom leaves, goes to work, and she works within 10 minutes of where the babysitter's location is. So that's roughly 8:10 in the morning. At about 8:35, mom gets a call at work from the babysitter saying there's a problem with Nancy. You need to come over. Babysitter hangs up. So obviously mom is like, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" She arrives back at the house within a couple minutes to find the babysitter giving Nancy mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And, her immediate reaction was like, "Oh my God, what happened?" Initially, the babysitter doesn't say anything about there being a fall or she hit her head or anything like that. Just prior to this, within the previous month, the child had bronchitis and some severe ear infections that actually ruptured her eardrums. So mom immediately thought that it was some sort of respiratory issue because she was giving her mouth to mouth. So within a couple minutes, officers from the Costa Mesa Police Department arrive, also with paramedics, and they do some life-saving efforts on the child, and they bring her to Costa Mesa Regional Hospital, I think is the name of it. So they arrive at the hospital, and they immediately discover that the child has a significant traumatic head injury, a significant skull fracture. So they talk to the babysitter, and the babysitter then says, "I think my 1-year-old son may have pulled her in the car seat off the couch, and she may have hit her head on the table or on the floor." So that's the babysitter statement. The child is eventually transferred to Chalk Hospital, and unfortunately, she's declared brain dead when she gets to Chalk Hospital. So it was at this point where Costa Mesa realizes, like, hey, this particular pocket is unincorporated sheriff's department jurisdiction. So then they call in the sheriff's detectives. And they talk to the mom, and the mom gives the account of, "Hey, I dropped her off. This is what happened," and so forth. And they talk to the babysitter, and the babysitter says, I think my 1-year-old may have pulled her off the couch. And so they confer with the doctors, and obviously the injury is much more significant than simply falling off a couch. And fast forward to the autopsy, not only do they find this significant skull fracture, but they also find some significant injury to her spine and lower back, which obviously is inconsistent with the fall. So the detectives go round and round with the babysitter and the biological mom, and the problem at the time, and again, I'm not sure how they deduced this, but the question was, who may have inflicted the injury, either the biological mom or the babysitter, due to the really compressed time frame. So the thought was, mom might have possibly done it and then turn the child over to the babysitter, and then the babysitter realizes, like, oh, there's a problem. Or it could have been the babysitter after mom left.
What about the kids?
The kids were 1-year-old. So there's really no indication that they could have been involved in any type of injury like this. And, if you're familiar with what it's like having 1-year-olds, reflecting back on my own kids when they were that young and my grandkids now, I don't know if they have the dexterity or even the strength to be able to pull a child in a car seat off the table to cause that type of injury. The other thing was, in the subsequent interviews of the medical staff at Chalk Hospital, they related the amount of force it would have taken to cause that injury representative of a fall of greater than 10 feet. So significantly greater force than simply falling. Plus,
right off the couch or the coffee table.
Correct. So kind of the Reader's Digest version was,
Was this a 2-story house or a 1-story?
1-story kind of condo. So, and the couch was only 24 inches from the floor.
Okay.
So a fall of 2 feet onto a carpeted floor.
Okay.
So
and the babysitter said that when she got the child, she took her out of the car seat at first.
she took her out of the car seat. And by all accounts, both from the biological mom and from the babysitter, they both jointly said that, yes, the baby was fine, happy, engaging. You know, the baby even said, yeah, you know, I played with her with my own kids. I tried to get her to laugh. So
mom didn't bring a dead baby over there and try to pass it off as the babysitter did something.
correct. But in continuing to read through the case file, I'm certainly no medical expert, but my immediate thought was, if mom had done this prior to dropping the kid off at the babysitter, she would have delivered either a dead or at a minimum an unconscious baby, because there's no way that the kid is going to appear normal and be interactive for 20 to 25 minutes before, you know, essentially becoming brain dead. So that's my thought as I'm reading through this. So it turns out that the original investigators did submit this to the DA, and the DA was like, yeah, I don't think I could prove who might have been responsible. There's just not enough evidence.
Well, is there a possibility there was a guy that came over?
The babysitter's husband was at work, and neither one during their interviews said that anybody else was involved.
Do you think he could have come back?
Well, there was no indications that anybody entered the apartment. And then further into the babysitter's story, she says that after mom leaves, she was interacting with both her 2 children and baby Nancy. And her 2 children were a year old. Nancy was 10 months old. So there's a little bit of an age difference. So babysitter story is that my 2 had gotten into her diaper bag and they were pulling stuff out or whatever. So she put Nancy back into the car seat, which was still on the couch. She picked up all the stuff from the diaper bag, went into the kitchen to put some things in the refrigerator. And then when she was in the refrigerator, she hears a loud crash. She turns around. She sees the car seat wedged between the couch and the coffee table, and that baby Nancy lets out kind of a whimpering type cry. So the babysitter in her story admits that whatever happened at that point in time. So there was no indication that anybody came in or anybody else might have involved, either the mom or the babysitter.
But she is trying to pass it off on the kids.
Correct. She
Like
is
my
trying to pass it off to the
1-year-olds
kid.
are the ones that knocked the baby over.
Correct.
Because there's something that's missing. Well, I'll let you finish and then I'll tell you my thoughts on this.
So, again, I'm no medical expert, but in my layman's opinion, there's no way that mom could have done this.
Oh, mom, no. Mom
that
didn't kill her own baby.
And that it had to be in the babysitter's care. So,
I agree. But is it the kids or is it mom or someone else? If I'm a juror,
Correct.
that's what I'm thinking.
yes. At
I'm
least
thinking, no, mom didn't kill her
initial
baby.
impression so far, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, my immediate thought was, okay, I need some sort of definitive medical opinion that coincides with my thought that I'm not crazy. Like, yes, the kid would have either been dead or unconscious. So my first thought was to reach out to the county pathologist,
Dr. Tony?
Dr. Tony. Yes.
I love Dr. Tony.
So I reached out to Dr. Tony. I gave him copies of all the medical reports that I had, all the hospital records, paramedic run sheet, like everything I had medical wise, autopsy reports and so forth. And I said, hey, am I off base on this, or am I on the right path? And he says, yes. Basically, the long story short is, yes, I agree. And the word he used was likely. It's likely that the incident happened when the child was in the babysitter's care, and that the significance of the injuries received are inconsistent with the babysitter's story. So, okay, gives me something to run on. So I write up my follow-up report. I include Dr. Tony's medical opinion, and I'm like, okay, the question at the time was who could have been responsible. Dr. Tony just says, it couldn't have been mom, it was babysitter, so let's try and refile. So I send it over to the DA's office, and they come back and they say, we don't like the term likely. I'm like, okay, I guess I can.
I wouldn't like it either.
I can understand that. So
yeah, because then the jury, like, it's likely. Likely is not the burden of, that's not the standard you have to prove the case.
Correct. So fast forward a little bit. I reach out to Dr. Tony again, and he says, hey, you probably need to get a more definitive medical opinion than just me. So he suggested that I reach out to a clinical professor in the pediatric department at University of California, Irvine, as a competent medical authority. So I get a hold of this physician. I provide her all the medical information, everything I can think of. Like, I give everything to her, including the medical opinion from back in 1982 and autopsy photos, everything. Give her everything. And she comes up with a more definitive medical opinion. She's like, yes, absolutely. It is, the child would have either been unconscious or dead.
At 8 a.m. or between 8 and 10 a.m.
If mom would have done it, she would have turned over a dead baby. And she looked at the paramedic run sheet, and looking at the timeline of the events in question, the fact that by all intents and purposes, the kid was fine after 8:10. Paramedics were called at about 8:35. They arrived within less than 10 minutes. But based on the paramedics run sheet, the
heart rate.
Basically her opinion was the child was already dead by the time paramedics arrived. So if there's no way possible that mom could have inflicted this and the child would have been brain dead in 25 minutes with no other outward symptoms in the span of 20 or 25 minutes. Absolutely had to be the babysitter. The other thing
or someone else, Bob.
Or someone else. But again, there was no indication that anybody else was involved. And the babysitter story was she fell off the couch. Whether she's covering for somebody or we don't know.
This is where my questions come in. Do you want me to wait until you finish?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so
I love the interaction.
Okay. So what I'm thinking, if I'm a prosecutor, I'm thinking what the jurors are going to think, because they watch these crime shows, Bob, and they're always like, oh, who could it really have been? And you have to close that question for the jurors. Otherwise, in their mind, it's reasonable. So these are the things that I'm thinking. Babysitter knows who did it. End of story, in my opinion, okay? Because she's giving an alternative theory how the kid turned up dead that is inconsistent with the physical evidence, right? This little 2 kids knocked over the car seat. And she's also blaming it on 2 1-year-olds who obviously can't be prosecuted. There's no intent to kill. Right. So there's a lot of questions that I have about the babysitter and about the babysitter's husband. And I know you said there's no indication he came home, but that's because the babysitter didn't tell you, oh, by the way, my husband came home, or my boyfriend was hiding in the closet because I was banging him while my husband was at work, right? Like, there's a lot of what ifs on who killed this baby, because my question is, what's the motivation of the babysitter to kill the baby?
Yeah, I still don't know the answer.
That is what you're going to have a hard time. And when I say you, I mean the DA is going to have a hard time explaining that to the jury. What's the motivation for this woman, the babysitter, to kill this baby, knowing, like, if this baby's dead, right? Like, it's in my care. I'm going to have to call the paramedics. I'm going to have to call the mother. I'm going to have to explain why this baby's dead.
Correct.
So just arguably, I don't think that the jury would find it reasonable to believe that it was some premeditated murder, right?
Correct.
Now, but then the fact they're saying the baby is like, the fall was from over 10 feet.
Correct.
So babysitter can't be more than 6 feet tall at most.
Yes.
So where is this fall coming from? You said it was a 1-story building.
Yes.
So those are questions. Like, did she take the baby outside and drop him? I mean, like,
Well,
drop her out the window?
And true. Like, I still don't know the answers to those questions, but there is more to the story. Like, there's a ton more details in this whole thing. So I'm kind of giving the Reader's Digest version. But the babysitter was married, and her husband was at work.
They confirmed that?
I don't know if they confirmed that or not. The other thing,
Go back.
unfortunately,
Go
they
back
did
and
not.
check that out, Bob Taft.
Unfortunately, those records don't exist.
Because usually, I just think most of the time when you got a murder suspect, it tends to be a male over the female.
Well,
Would you
another thing
agree?
too, yeah, for the most part, yes.
I mean, what, 10% of women are the murderers?
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing is that the investigators never did a search warrant on the house.
What?
They never did. They never did a search warrant. They never processed the scene. All they did was they go in, they take a couple pictures of the interior of the house and leave. And that was it. That was the entire
There could have been
investigation.
blood upstairs. There could have been a
ton of
scuffle.
things, you know,
There
but
could have been a
unfortunately-
window open.
Yes. But unfortunately, all that was neglected, shall we say. The other thing, with regards to the babysitter statement, and, you know, you being a mom, me being a parent, I'll run the scenario by you. Her story is she's in the kitchen. She hears this crash. She hears baby Nancy give out a little whimper. She runs into the living room and sees the child on the floor between the couch and the table. The car seat is on top of her. So here's the couch, here's the table, lying on the car seat on top of her. Her story was that she thinks her 1-year-old was reaching down trying to lift up the car seat off of the baby. Could be, couldn't be, who knows. But then she goes, I picked up my 2 kids and I took them into the room because it was time for their nap.
Okay. That's insanity.
And then she comes back out anywhere between 30 seconds and 2 minutes later, and she says,
And leaves the baby that
Leaves the
she's
baby
in charge
on the
of
floor.
with the car seat on top of
still
it.
on top of her,
Yeah, she's...
comes back out and says, now I see that there's varying stories, but needless to say, she says at this point, I see that she's unconscious. I pick the child up. I go over to the phone in the kitchen, which there's nothing near the phone. There's no counter. There's no seat. There's no table. And she calls the mom. The whole time while she's giving mouth to mouth, she's dialing the phone and talking to mom and saying, there's a problem, come over. But yet she's still giving mouth to mouth. After calling the mom, then she calls paramedics and the paramedics come over. And her statement to the investigating officers was, I gave mouth to mouth until paramedics arrived and they took over. Well, when you interview the 2 Costa Mesa officers that were the first ones on scene, they said the babysitter was in a panic. She's wailing like, oh my God, blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't have let this happen. And the biological mom is the one that's doing the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. So essentially, whose account are you going to believe? So the other thing is that in the expert medical opinion I got from this physician at UCI, she also specialized in child abuse cases. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but she referenced a thing called sentinel injuries.
Yeah, previous injuries, and there's like some scarring left behind or some signs.
Correct.
Medical, physical signs of the prior injuries.
Yes. Well, I had never heard that term before. So she provided me with an article of some research they did on these sentinel injuries. And turns out that, so this incident occurred in February. The previous November, around Thanksgiving, while in the babysitter's care, baby Nancy experiences another injury. And again, the babysitter's story was, I was interacting with my 2 children. The baby was in the car seat on the table. And the next thing I know, she jumps out of her car seat and lands on some toys on the floor.
Like an 8-month-old?
Correct. Even less.
7-month-old baby.
Yes.
No, that's bullshit. She's lying.
Right.
Okay.
So now there's evidence of this previous sentinel injury, and in recounting the biological mother's statement, she said that essentially the child had raccoon eyes. And the babysitter attributed that the child was crying so hard that she burst the blood vessels in her cheeks, and that's what caused the black eyes for the child.
Okay, I'm not victim blaming the mom here, but if I am turning over my little baby to a babysitter and my baby ends up with black eyes, I'm never bringing my baby back there.
Correct. And again, I
mean,
unfortunately,
my heart's broken for the mom, but
the biological mom is since deceased. So
she is.
She is.
So I can say, duh, you shouldn't have brought her back.
Correct. And again,
that's not nice.
She
it's
was,
not kind, but
first time mom. She had no other family around.
And she believed
She's trying
this gal.
to figure this out on her own. And she may have lent some credence to this individual because she had children of her own.
Yeah.
So she's like, she's a mom herself, and I'm going to believe what this person says.
Yeah, and I gotta preface it with, I go into everything with like one eye open. I don't trust anybody. So I'd be like,
well, that's because we're in the profession that we're in.
Yeah.
So
you start from like, I don't trust you to begin with. You're shady.
Yes.
And then you got to
convince me that you're.
Yeah. Convince me that you're not shady, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would have been suspicious. But had I been a new mom and like, I don't know what I'm doing, and and most people are going to believe that a woman who's got 2 twin 1-year-olds herself isn't going to be like harming your baby.
Yes.
That you'd like to believe they have some maternal instincts and whatnot.
Correct.
I still think there's a guy involved. I do. I think mom's covering, and I think it might be for a guy. See, that's the problem you're going to have on this case. Is that why the DA didn't file it?
No, they said that, well, the second time around?
Yeah.
I don't know. They never reviewed it.
Oh, what?
So, yeah, it's never.
You better get on that DA's office. I'm just calling you out right now.
Unfortunately, it's never been.
Review the case about baby Nancy and find out where the husband/boyfriend is right now.
Not that.
When did this happen? What year? 80-something?
1982.
Oh, gosh. So they're like, are they old now? Where's the babysitter? She's still alive?
She's
that
still
baby
alive,
killer coverer.
We actually went out and tried to interview her regarding, all these additional medical findings. There were a number of inconsistencies in her statements over the years.
Also.
So we wanted to try and clarify some things, and we went out. She was actually in the front yard of her residence when we approached her. I asked, like, hey, do you recognize this particular name? And she's like, yes, I do. And I said, well, would you be interested in speaking to me about that case? She's like, nope, you can talk to my attorney. Immediately lawyered up. Yeah. So where she had previously been cooperative throughout the investigation. So
yeah, she's smartened up since then. Like, don't say a word.
Yes.
Which is smart, because just for our listeners, in case they don't know this, there's no statute of limitations for murder.
Correct.
So they can get you at any time. You're not getting away with it. If you've got some dead body in your backyard, you're not getting away with it because Detective Trapp is on the hunt. Okay, so going back to this case, so the DA, it's still out there for them to take another look. They
Correct.
could, in theory, file it. I think it's a hard case to prove, Bob. I'm just putting lawyer brain on for the very questions that I have. You got 12. I'm just one person, and I'm more willing to believe she's guilty than most people. And I'm not saying she isn't accessory after the fact or isn't the actual murderer of this baby. I think had they done some more investigative work, perhaps that could have been ferreted out, with some crime scene analysis and everything. Also, I'd love to know if the male involved had an alibi. Like, was he really at work, or did he come home because he forgot something? And there's 1,000 things, because there's 30 minutes unaccounted for in that investigation.
Correct.
Right? And you got 2 1-year-olds who can't tell you what happened. Did the kids appear to be upset, or you don't even know?
You have no idea.
Yeah.
They were never interviewed.
Well, if I did review it right now, I probably wouldn't file that case either, Rob. I'm sorry. What do our listeners think?
That's where cops and attorneys think differently.
That's where we differ, but it's okay.
And granted,
you see some of the issues, right?
There's There's more to the story, and I did a pretty lengthy review of all the statements involved and pointed out all the inconsistencies, which obviously I don't recall all those details, and we don't have the time to cover those here. But in my opinion, and again, I guess there's always this question of some phantom person, but you can throw that out in any investigation, that there's always this phantom person that may be responsible for it. So again, that's where we differ in our mindset. Like, yep, that's the person responsible. Whereas, like, that may be true, but
listen, that baby was in her custody and her care, and whether it was her kids or her boyfriend, husband, whoever, to me, she's responsible for the care of that child, and so she's responsible for the death of that baby.
Well, and the other thing too is nobody's ever been able to establish motive.
Yeah, that's where you got because jurors are going to ask that question: why? Why would she kill this little 10-month-old baby?
But it's not a requirement.
And no, we don't have to prove motive, but it sure does help the jurors to say, "Aha!"
Yes, it
okay,
absolutely does. Well, and the other thing too is, throughout the course of the interviews, the babysitter alludes to that. Baby Nancy was a sickly child. She cried a lot. She was. She would cry for no reason, so maybe, theoretically, she was watching like, 3 kids. Yes.
Threw her across the room?
It may not have been intentional, that maybe she just had enough at that point, and the baby's crying uncontrollably and did something, did something. So, yeah. And then obviously she's like, uh-oh, there's a problem.
Yeah, I'll say. So, you got a dead baby on your hands. That's a problem.
Yeah. The other thing that they talked about was when...
Don't you wish that lady would just tell us what really happened?
Yeah, I wish.
Like, come on.
I wish. Like, come on,
babysitter. Tell us the truth.
Nobody deserves justice than an 8-month-old or 10-month-old child. Yeah. So, but, one of the other inconsistencies in the statement was, she went and picked up the baby from the floor. Well, then you would think, like, where's the car seat? Car seat's got to be out of the way. And she even says, like, yeah, I picked the kid up, threw the car seat out of the way, and, started doing mouth to mouth. But when the initial officers arrived, they said, no, the chair was lodged still between the couch and the
car seat.
The car seat and the car seat was lodged between the couch and the coffee table. So if she really did pick up the car seat and throw it out of the way, why did the responding officers say that it was still there? They had to move it out of the way to get to the child to take over. So, again, all these
details that are inconsistent. Yeah, she's guilty. She's full of shit. Is what
she's obviously.
But I don't know. I'd want to know why. I'd want to know, like, really just admit that it was an accident. But that doesn't sound accidental in any way, shape, or form.
Correct.
It sounds like she lost it.
Or
I think there might be some guy involved. I'm just saying. To be that violent towards a baby, it's not, because you're talking spinal cord injury and blunt force trauma to the head, and
Correct.
Wasn't there like multiple and Yeah, maybe she just can't control her anger. I don't know. But proving it is a whole nother story.
Absolutely, yes.
That would be dicey.
That's where the dilemma lies.
And therein lies the rub, folks. That's where we have the darkness, where you can't really prove these cases. But maybe if the babysitter's listening to my podcast, she'll do the right thing. And God will compel her to give some justice to baby Nancy. And do the right thing and tell people what really happened. Anyway, or stop covering for whoever really did it.
And again, this is kind of the dilemmas that you come up with working these old cases. Like, there's so many unanswered questions. Like, I wish I could go into a time machine and go back and be like, oh, we need to do this. We need to handle it like a homicide investigation. They absolutely do not.
That's why it's important from the jump to do a great investigation, because once the opportunity's gone, it's gone for good.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's no statute of limitations on murder. Yeah. But you can't go back and recreate the wheel, unfortunately.
Oh, you can't, unfortunately. All right, well, we're out of time, but I know that you're coming back for one more episode to hear another juicy case. So we're out of time for now. Be sure to stay tuned for the continuation of cold case investigator Bob Taft telling us about another juicy case that the DA wouldn't file. Until we meet again, if you can't find the light, be the light for all these victims of crime like Bob Taft. So long. See you next episode.
Be the light, shine so bright.